The moment I walked out of the conference room, leaving behind a tray with nothing but a half-baked cake and a single paper napkin, I knew something had shifted. I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding against my ribs, waiting for the explosion that would surely come. But what followed wasn't shouting or confusion. It was silence. Not the kind that slips in quietly, but the kind that demands to be felt. The kind that falls like a hammer when the invisible person suddenly stops being invisible. The quarterly executive meeting at Stratus Edge Consulting always started the same way. 10 a.m. sharp, black coffee in the brushed steel carafe, warm croissants arranged in a perfect spiral, fresh fruit cut into precise cubes, and those little chocolate muffins everyone pretended not to want, but devoured anyway. The spread had become an expectation, my spread. My hands, my time, my budget. And yet, no one ever said my name. That morning, I'd arrived on time as always. The Chicago skyline was a gray smudge against the October rain, the kind of day where the clouds hang so low you could almost touch them from our 38th floor offices. I had pressed the elevator button with damp fingers, rehearsing what I was about to do. 8 years of being invisible was enough. I placed one tray in the center of the gleaming mahogany conference table. A single, raw, uncooked vanilla cake. Doughy, unfinished, limp in its foil pan. No coffee, no cutlery, no pastries, just that. A symbol of all the work I'd done that no one saw until it wasn't done. Then I left. 30 seconds later, I heard it. The silence. I imagined Michael Renshaw, our CEO, checking his watch, then looking around the room, expecting someone else to mention the obvious. I pictured Heather Jennings, director of client accounts, narrowing her eyes at the raw batter, maybe poking it with a manicured finger, confusion replacing her usual self-assured smile. I leaned against the wall, breathing through my mouth to stay quiet. "Where's Melissa?" I finally heard Michael ask, his voice muffled through the door. It was the first time in months I'd heard him say my name. "I don't know," Heather responded, her voice sharp with irritation. "But what even is this?" "It's a cake," someone else said. "An unbaked cake." "Is this some kind of joke?" Michael again. I closed my eyes, feeling something unravel. Inside me, not fear, but relief. For 8 years, I had been the coffee lady, the birthday rememberer, the make-it-happen person who operated in the shadows. I had thought being helpful would make me visible. Instead, it had made me furniture, expected, used, and utterly unremarkable. The conference room door swung open. Sharon Kim from HR stepped into the hallway, her dark eyes finding mine. Immediately, I straightened my spine, ready for whatever came next. "Melissa," she said, not unkindly. "What's going on?" 8 years of being overlooked, crystallized into a single moment of clarity. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt powerful. "I think," I said quietly, "they've finally noticed I exist." Sharon studied my face, then glanced back at the conference room. Through the crack in the door, I could see Michael standing now, his tie slightly askew, his expression caught between confusion and irritation. "The cake is unbaked," I explained, keeping my voice steady. "Sometimes the work is invisible until it isn't done." Sharon's eyes widened slightly. She was smart, one of the few people who had always acknowledged my contributions. She got it immediately. "Come with me," she said. "I think we need to talk." As we walked toward her office, I felt lighter than I had in years. The building that had been my second home, with its polished floors and glass walls and constant humming energy of people working to impress other people, suddenly felt different. Or maybe I was the one who had changed. My name is Melissa Carter, and for nearly 8 years, I worked as an executive, project coordinator at Stratus Edge Consulting, one of the top strategy firms in Chicago. Today was the day I stopped being invisible. And it all started with a cake I refused to bake. I didn't come from money. I didn't have a fancy MBA from Northwestern or Chicago Booth like most of my colleagues. What I had was work ethic, drilled into me by my single mother, who cleaned hotel rooms in downtown Chicago for 30 years without missing a day. "People will notice quality," she used to tell me, "even if they don't notice you." I believed her. That belief carried me through community college, through a night school business degree, through 6 interviews to land my position at Stratus Edge. I was proud to be there. Proud enough to come early, stay late, remember birthdays, clean up after meetings, and, without ever being asked, start coordinating the office coffee breaks. It began innocently enough. 4 months into my job, Someone had forgotten to order bagels for a client meeting. I saw the panic on Sharon's face as she realized the oversight, and without a word, I grabbed my coat, ran 6 blocks in Chicago winter wind to the Good Bakery, and returned with a box of still warm, everything bagels, cream cheese, and fresh fruit I'd arranged on a tray. I saved the day. People smiled. I felt seen. After that, it became my thing. I was the one who restocked the Nespresso pods before anyone noticed they were running low. The one who added the cinnamon sticks that Michael Renshaw loved in his afternoon coffee. The one who sliced the oranges just right, because Heather. Jennings once rolled her eyes and said they looked messy when I'd cut them into regular wedges. "These spreads are amazing, thank you," people would say. Not to me, specifically, but to the room. As if the food had appeared by magic, as if the carefully selected pastries and perfectly brewed coffee were ambient features of Stratus Edge, like the recessed lighting or the ergonomic chairs. At first, I didn't mind. I was building relationships, I told myself. I was becoming indispensable. I was creating a place for myself in a world where I didn't naturally fit. But here's the truth. It was never about the food. It was about being seen. And I wasn't. My actual job, coordinating executive projects, preparing briefing documents, researching market trends, became secondary to my unofficial role as office caterer. My ideas weren't sought in meetings. My name wasn't included in emails. My contributions weren't mentioned in project recaps. But when something was missing, a report not printed, a client's dietary restriction not accommodated, a birthday not celebrated, all eyes turned to me. The shift happened so gradually I barely noticed. "Melissa, could you grab us some coffee?" became their coffee? Became just expectant glances toward the empty carafe. My presence became assumed, my work invisible until it wasn't done. When Heather got promoted last year to Director of Client Accounts, she gave a speech thanking the incredible leadership at Stratus Edge. I had ghostwritten half her pitch decks. I had coached her through presentation jitters. I had even helped her select the suit she wore to the final interview. She didn't even make eye contact with me during her toast. I didn't want praise. I wasn't looking for applause. I wanted recognition. A simple, "Melissa, thank you." I never got it. The worst part? I became complicit in my own invisibility. I stopped speaking up in meetings. I channeled my creativity into finding the perfect pastries instead of pushing for my ideas to be heard. I measured my worth by whether Michael remembered to mention how much he enjoyed the coffee, not by whether he remembered my name. One Tuesday morning last April, I overheard 2 new analysts talking in the break room. "Who makes the coffee around here?" one asked. "I don't know," the other replied. "It just appears." They both laughed. I was standing 3 feet away, refilling. The sugar container. They didn't even glance in my direction. That night, I sat in my 1-bedroom apartment in Bucktown, staring at the business card I'd carried in my wallet for 8 years. Melissa Carter, Executive Project Coordinator, Stratus Edge Consulting. I traced my name with my finger, wondering when I'd stopped being that person and started being just the coffee lady. My mother had passed away 2 years earlier. I wondered what she would say if she could see me now. Would she still believe that quality work speaks for itself? Or would she tell me that sometimes you have to speak up, because quality work means nothing if no one knows who did it? I opened my laptop and began typing. "Attention. I've coordinated the coffee service for 416 meetings. I've baked 26 birthday cakes. I've accommodated 52 dietary restrictions. I've done this in addition to my actual job. No one has ever said thank you. This stops now." I stared at the words for a long time. Then I deleted them. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, I went to bed early, set my alarm for 5:30 a.m., and prepared to do it all again the next day. That was 6 months ago. 6 more months of being invisible. 6 more months of baking and brewing and arranging and smiling as people walked past me to thank the room. Until today. Until the unbaked cake. Until the silence that said everything I'd been unable to say for 8 years. It started slowly. The unraveling. 2 months before the cake incident, I sent out an email asking if anyone would like to rotate responsibility for the coffee break. My message was cheerful, professional, and completely reasonable. "Hey team, I've enjoyed coordinating our refreshments, but I think it would be great to share this responsibility. Any volunteers for next week?" No one responded, not even Sharon, who usually acknowledged my emails within minutes. That silence was the first crack in the facade I'd built. The pleasant, helpful Melissa, who never complained, never asked for, anything, never made waves. The next morning, the exact same email appeared in my inbox, but from Heather Jennings. Team, let's divide up coffee break duties. Reply with your preferred date. Within an hour, her message had 15 responses. Michael Renshaw himself volunteered for the following Monday. I printed both emails and placed them side by side on my desk, staring at them until the words blurred. It wasn't just that Heather had stolen my idea, it was that people had responded to her, as if the suggestion only became real when it came from her. At the next town hall meeting, Michael gave Heather a shout out for her team player spirit after she shared a stale Costco cake for someone's birthday. I had baked custom cakes for 6 birthdays that year, from scratch. Not one was mentioned. That night, I drove home in silence. No radio, no podcast, just the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers clearing the September rain. Chicago glittered around me, all glass and steel and ambition, but I felt hollow inside, disconnected from the energy of the city I loved. In my apartment, I opened my recipe book, a leather-bound journal my mother had given me before she died. For the sweetness you bring to the world, she'd written inside the cover. I traced her handwriting with my fingertip, remembering how her hands always smelled of lemon, and how she'd taught me to bake on Sunday afternoons in our tiny kitchen. People might forget your name, she'd told me once, but they never forget how you make them feel. I'd thought she meant the joy of eating something delicious. Now, I wondered if she'd been warning me, that people would take the sweetness I offered without ever seeing the hands that created it. But it wasn't just about snacks anymore. My ideas were getting stolen. During a strategy meeting for a new financial client, I suggested targeting millennials with customized investment portfolios. Heather dismissed it outright. The next week, she presented the exact same idea in her report. Michael called it innovative thinking. My efforts were absorbed into Heather's presentations, my research folded into others' reports. I was being CC'd on emails instead of addressed directly. Tasks were assigned to me in hallway whispers, never written down, never acknowledged in project plans. Melissa, can you just became the start of sentences that ended with work no one else wanted to do, work that would never be credited to me, work that somehow fell outside my job description while still being expected. When I applied for the senior project manager position, a role I was qualified for and had been unofficially doing for months, HR said they'd keep me in mind. Heather got it instead, even though she lacked 2 of the core certifications required in the job listing. We felt Heather had more leadership presence, Sharon told me gently when I asked for feedback. Her eyes wouldn't meet mine, and I knew she was just repeating what she'd been told to say. Leadership presence. It was code for something I couldn't quite name. Some quality that made people pay attention when Heather spoke. Some invisible force field of importance that I apparently lacked. One afternoon in early October, I found a note on my desk in Michael's handwriting. It said, "Could you make the next meeting gluten-free? One of the VPs has an allergy." That was it. No, "Hi, Melissa." No, thanks. No acknowledgement of the 7 meetings I had catered that month, or the fact that I'd stayed late 3 nights in a row to finish a competitive analysis that his team needed. That night, I cried in my car in the company garage, sitting there until the motion sensor lights clicked off and left me in darkness. My tears weren't for the note itself, but for what it represented. 8 years of my life spent trying to be valuable to people who didn't even see me. Something inside me snapped. The next morning, I woke up different. The Melissa who desperately wanted approval had gone to sleep, and someone new had taken her place. Someone with clearer eyes and a steadier voice. Someone who had finally realized that no amount of perfectly brewed coffee would ever make these people respect me. I still did my job. I still coordinated the meetings, prepared the reports, answered the emails. But I stopped bringing in extra pastries from the bakery near my apartment. I stopped remembering everyone's coffee preferences. I stopped staying until 8 p.m. to make sure everything was perfect for the next morning. No one noticed, or if they did, they didn't say anything. Until the quarterly executive meeting, the one with the raw cake, the one that changed everything. The night before the quarterly meeting, I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by the familiar comfort of measuring cups and mixing bowls, my famous vanilla cake, the one everyone assumed was from an expensive bakery, the one with mascarpone frosting that Michael once called better than my mother's. I gathered the ingredients: cake flour, sugar, vanilla beans, not extract, never extract, farm-fresh eggs from the Logan Square Farmers Market, European butter. I measured with precision, the way my mother had taught me. Baking isn't just following a recipe, she always said. It's about intention, about putting care into something that will bring others joy. I mixed the batter, watching it transform from separate ingredients into something unified and full of potential. The kitchen filled with the scent of vanilla and possibilities. Then I stopped. I didn't preheat the oven. I didn't line the cake pans with parchment paper. I simply poured the batter into a foil pan, covered it with plastic wrap, and placed it in the refrigerator. I slept dreamlessly that night. When my alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., I didn't hit snooze. I showered, dressed in a crisp white blouse and charcoal pencil skirt, applied my makeup with more care than usual. I wanted to look my best today. It felt important, somehow. The raw cake waited in my refrigerator, a silent rebuke to years of unacknowledged effort. I wrote a sticky note. Sometimes the work is invisible until it isn't. I placed it under the cake tray. The morning commute on the L train was crowded as always, business people clutching travel mugs and staring at their phones, avoiding eye contact. Chicago in October was beautiful, leaves turning, gold and crimson, the air sharp with the promise of winter. I felt strangely calm as the train rocked beneath Lake Michigan, carrying me toward a moment I couldn't quite envision. At 9:57 a.m., I walked into the conference room, set the tray down in the center of the table, and walked out without a word. No coffee urns, no fruit platters, no perfectly arranged pastries, just that cake, raw, unfinished, and heavy with meaning. I returned to my desk and began answering emails as if it were any other Tuesday. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady on the keyboard. The meeting started at 10 a.m. sharp. I imagined them all filing in. Michael with his leather portfolio, Heather with her iPad Pro, the rest of the executive team with their matching expressions of self-importance. I pictured their confusion when they saw the bare table, the single foil pan where an elaborate spread should have been. I waited for someone to come find me, to ask what had happened. No one did. The minutes ticked by. 10:05, 10:06. Sharon Kim appeared at my desk, her expression unreadable. "Melissa," she said gently, "what's going on?" I looked up from my computer, meeting her eyes directly. With, "What?" "The situation in the conference room. Is there a problem?" I kept my voice neutral. Sharon glanced around, then lowered her voice. "There's no coffee, no food, just a pan of, is that raw cake batter?" "Yes." "I don't understand." I took a deep breath. This was the moment I'd been rehearsing in my mind for months. For 8 years, I've been providing coffee and food for every meeting. Not because it's my job, it isn't. I did it because I thought if I was helpful enough, people would see me, value me, but they don't. They expect it, they consume it, and they never, ever thank me. Sharon's eyes widened slightly. "Do you know what Michael wrote to me yesterday? A note saying, 'Make it gluten-free.' Not Melissa, could you please make it gluten-free? Just an order, like I'm a, vending machine, not a person." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "I'm tired of being invisible, Sharon. I'm tired of being the coffee lady instead of the executive project coordinator I was hired to be. I'm tired of watching Heather take credit for my ideas while I'm stuck arranging pastries." The words were pouring out now, 8 years of silence finally breaking. I left that cake unbaked because that's how I feel. Unfinished, undercooked, like I've never been given the chance to become what I could be here. Sharon was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised me. She nodded. "I've seen it," she said quietly. "I should have said something sooner." "Yes," I agreed. "You should have." That afternoon, Sharon scheduled a private meeting with Michael and me in her office. I arrived exactly on time, my shoulders back, my gaze steady. I had crossed some invisible line, and there was no going back. Either Stratus Edge would see me for who I really was, or I would find somewhere that would. Michael was already seated when I entered, looking uncomfortable in one of the visitor chairs instead of at the head of the table where he usually sat. "Melissa," he began, "Sharon tells me you're unhappy." I almost laughed at the inadequacy of the word. Unhappy. Like I'd received the wrong lunch order or missed a train. "I'm invisible," I corrected him. "I have been for years." I told him everything. 8 years of quiet contributions, of unpaid labor, of being erased from the narrative of the company I had helped build. "You remember the cake," I said finally, "but you never remembered the baker." He didn't speak. He looked ashamed. For once, I didn't fill the silence. The silence in Sharon's office stretched until it became its own presence, filling the space between Michael and me like a third person. I watched him struggle with what I'd said, his face cycling through confusion, defensiveness, and finally something that looked remarkably like shame. I don't know what to say, he finally admitted, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. You don't have to say anything, I replied. You just have to listen, and then decide what kind of company you want Stratus Edge to be. Sharon leaned forward slightly. Michael, what Melissa is describing is a systemic issue. It's not just about coffee breaks. It's about recognition, visibility, and how we value contributions. Michael nodded slowly. I understand that now. He looked directly at me, really seeing me perhaps for the first time. Melissa, I owe you an apology. A significant one. I waited, not making it easier for him. 8 years of invisibility wouldn't be erased with a casual, sorry. You've been doing work far beyond your job description, work that made us all look good, and not only did we not compensate you for it, we didn't even acknowledge it. He ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. That's not the kind of leader I want to be, or the kind of company I want us to be. What are you going to do about it? I asked simply. He seemed surprised by the directness of my question. Good. It was time for some discomfort. I think, he began, then stopped, recalibrating. No, I know we need to create a more equitable environment, one where contributions are recognized regardless of title or position. He glanced at Sharon. What would you recommend as first steps? Sharon had clearly been thinking about this. An employee contributions review committee, she said promptly. A formal structure to ensure that work is properly attributed and rewarded. And I think Melissa should chair it. Michael nodded. Agreed. With additional compensation for the role, of course. I felt a flutter of something unexpected. Hope, perhaps. But I'd been disappointed too many times to accept this easy victory. I'll consider it, I said, on 2 conditions. They both looked at me expectantly. First, I will no longer be organizing coffee breaks or any other food. Service. That needs to be either rotated among all staff or handled by the office manager. Absolutely, Michael agreed immediately. Second, I'll be taking 2 weeks of paid sabbatical, starting tomorrow. I need time to think about whether I still have a future at Stratus Edge. This seemed to surprise him, but after a moment, he nodded. That's fair. Take the time you need. Your job will be waiting for you. As I stood to leave, he added, And Melissa, thank you. Not just for this wake-up call, but for everything you've done over the years. I'm sorry it took an unbaked cake for me to see it. The words I'd waited 8 years to hear. They felt good, but not as good as I'd imagined. Perhaps because I no longer needed them quite as desperately as I once had. The next morning, I didn't set my alarm. I slept until my body naturally woke, something I hadn't done in years. The October sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, catching dust motes in golden suspension. I made coffee, just for myself, and sat by my window, watching the neighborhood come to life below. For 2 weeks, I rediscovered myself outside the context of Stratus Edge. I took long walks along Lake Michigan, the water steel gray under autumn skies. I visited the Art Institute, spending hours with paintings I'd rushed past on lunch breaks. I baked, not for meetings or birthdays, but for the pure joy of creation. I dropped cookies off at the elderly neighbor's apartment downstairs, accepting her genuine thanks with a smile that felt new on my face. I thought about what I wanted, not just from Stratus Edge, but from my life. I'd spent so long trying to be seen that I'd forgotten to see myself, to recognize my own worth independent of others' validation. On my last day of sabbatical, I received an email from Heather. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won out. Melissa, it began, I owe you an apology. Michael spoke to me about what happened, and I realize now how I've contributed to making you feel invisible. The truth is, I've always been intimidated by how effortlessly you seem to manage everything. I've never told you this, but I keep the presentation notes you gave me 2 years ago in my desk drawer. I look at them before every client meeting. I should have acknowledged your help. I didn't know it bothered you that much. I stared at the screen, processing her words. The old Melissa would have immediately accepted this apology, grateful for any recognition. The new Melissa read between the lines. I didn't know it bothered you that much, was just another way of saying, I knew it bothered you, just not enough for me to care. I closed my laptop without responding. I would deal with Heather when I returned to the office. For now, this day belonged to me. The morning. I returned to Stratus Edge. Something had shifted in the atmosphere. People nodded to me in the elevator, made eye contact in the hallways. Word had clearly spread. Sharon met me at my desk with a cappuccino, from the good coffee shop 2 blocks away, not the office machine. "Welcome back," she said, setting it down beside my keyboard. "There's a company-wide email going out this morning. Michael. Created the Employee Contributions Review Committee, and you're announced as the chair." She hesitated. "That is, if you still want it." I took a sip of the perfectly made cappuccino. "I do, but I want something else as well." "Name it." "I want to be considered for the Strategic Planning Director position that's opening next month." Sharon's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. "I'll make sure. Your name is at the top of the list." Later that morning, I encountered Heather by the printer. She fidgeted with her watch, clearly uncomfortable. "Melissa, did you get my email?" she asked. "I did." "And?" I smiled, not unkindly, but not warmly either. "I appreciate you reaching out, Heather, but an apology without changed behavior is just manipulation." Her eyes widened. I don't need you to tell me you're sorry. I need you to stop taking credit for other people's work, not just mine, everyone's." She flushed, looking down at her expensive shoes. "I didn't realize—" "That's the problem, Heather. You never thought to ask." I gathered my printed documents. "We'll be working together on the Thompson account next week. Let's start fresh there." I walked away before she could respond, feeling lighter than I had in years. 3 weeks after my return, we held our first meeting of the Employee Contributions Review Committee. The conference room, the same one where I'd left the unbaked cake, looked different somehow. Or perhaps I was seeing it through new eyes. Sharon sat beside me at the head of the table, a silent show of support. Michael had appointed 5 other members. 2 senior managers, an analyst, the head of IT, and surprisingly, Heather. I suspected the last was his way of ensuring she understood the message being sent. "Thank you all for joining this initiative," I began, my voice steady and clear. "Our goal is to create a culture where all contributions are recognized, regardless of title or position." For the next hour, we discussed specific issues and potential solutions, proper attribution in presentations, credit for ideas in meeting minutes, rotation of support tasks, expansion of the annual review process to include peer recognition. It felt surreal to be leading this conversation, to be not just visible but centered, my voice the one guiding the discussion. Not because I'd brought cake, but because I had ideas worth hearing. After the EI meeting, Michael pulled me aside. "This is good work, Melissa. Really good." He hesitated. "I've been thinking about what you said, about remembering the cake but not the baker. It made me realize how many other contributions we've been missing." I nodded. "It's never too late to start seeing people, Michael." "No, it isn't." He cleared his throat. "The strategic planning director role, I'd like you to interview for it. Your perspective is exactly what we need." The following weeks brought a cascade of small but significant changes. My name appeared in email chains acknowledging my input. People began stopping by my desk to ask for my thoughts on projects, not just on what refreshments to order. The quarterly report included a section highlighting individual contributions that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. The most surprising change came from Heather. During a client presentation where she was using market research I'd compiled, she paused and said, "I want to credit Melissa Carter for this analysis. Her insights were crucial to our approach." She glanced at me across the table, a tentative olive branch extended. I nodded slightly, accepting it for what it was. Not friendship, perhaps, but professional respect. A beginning. The interview for the strategic planning director position was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. I prepared thoroughly, assembling a portfolio of projects I'd contributed to, ideas I'd developed, results I'd helped achieve. I practiced my responses to likely questions, standing before my bathroom mirror until the words flowed naturally. The morning of the interview, I baked. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because baking still brought me joy when it was my choice. I made cinnamon rolls from my mother's recipe, the scent of butter and spice filling my apartment with memories of Sunday mornings and her gentle hands guiding mine. I brought them to the office in a simple box, placing them in the break room with a note. Made with love by Melissa Carter. Help yourself. Then I walked into my interview with my head high and my heart calm. The panel consisted of Michael, Sharon, and 2 board members. For 90 minutes, they questioned me about my vision for the department, my approach to strategic planning, my ideas for the future of Stratus Edge. I answered with confidence, born not of arrogance, but of knowing my own worth. When Michael asked about my greatest strength, I smiled. I see what others miss, I said simply. Both problems and opportunities. One of the board members, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, nodded appreciatively. And your greatest weakness? I considered the question carefully. The old Melissa would have given a non-answer, something safe like, I'm too detail-oriented, or I work too hard. The new Melissa chose honesty. I've spent too long waiting to be seen instead of making myself visible, I said, but I'm working on that. When I returned to my desk, there was a note waiting for me. Not a demanding post-it with an order, but a proper card in an envelope. Inside, in handwriting I recognized as belonging to Karen from accounting. Your cinnamon rolls made my day. Thank you for sharing your talent. Such a simple thing, this acknowledgement, yet it felt more valuable than any expensive gift. I tucked the card into my desk drawer, a reminder of what recognition truly meant. Not grand gestures, but genuine appreciation for the person behind the work. 1 week after my interview, Sharon called me into her office. I'd been expecting this. The decision about the strategic planning director position couldn't be delayed much longer, but I still felt my heart quicken as I knocked on her door. Come in, Melissa, she said, her expression giving nothing away. I sat across from her, hands folded in my lap, projecting a calm I didn't entirely feel. The past month had been transformative, but this moment felt pivotal, a test of whether Stratus Edge had truly changed or if the recent shifts were merely superficial accommodations. Sharon slid a folder across her desk. The board has made their decision. I opened it slowly, scanning the formal letter inside. We are pleased to offer you the position of Strategic Planning Director. I looked up, meeting Sharon's eyes. Her professional demeanor cracked, and she broke into a wide smile. Congratulations, Melissa. It was unanimous. A wave of emotion washed over me, not just pride or relief, but a profound sense of vindication. Not because I'd won some contest with Heather or proven something to Michael, but because I'd finally been evaluated on my actual abilities rather than my willingness to make coffee. Thank you, I said, my voice steady despite the fluttering in my chest. This means a lot. You earned it, Sharon replied, her tone serious again. And not just because of recent events. Your work has always been exceptional. We just didn't see it clearly until now. The transition into my new role happened quickly. My office moved from the open floor plan to a corner space with actual walls and a door. A small thing, perhaps, but symbolic of the shift in how I was positioned within the company. My salary increased substantially, and my name appeared on the leadership page of the company website, alongside a professional headshot. My first major task was developing a 5-year strategic plan for Stratus Edge's expansion into healthcare consulting. I assembled a team that deliberately included people from different departments and levels, including Raj from IT, whose technical insights had been overlooked in previous initiatives, and Zoe, a junior analyst with innovative ideas about data visualization. 2 months into my new role, we presented our preliminary findings to the executive committee. As I stood at the front of the conference room, the same one where I'd once left the unbaked cake, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me here. Before we begin, I said, looking around the table, I want to acknowledge the team that made this possible. I named each contributor, highlighting their specific input, watching their faces as they received recognition many of them had rarely experienced. Michael nodded approvingly. This is excellent work, Melissa. Your team approach is exactly what we needed. After the meeting, Heather approached me in the hallway. Our relationship had remained professional but distant since my return from sabbatical. We worked together when necessary but weren't friends, might never be friends. That was impressive, she said, sounding genuinely admiring, especially how you highlighted everyone's contributions. Thank you, I replied. It's important to me that people know their work matters. She hesitated, then added, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about apologies without changed behavior. You were right. She met my gaze directly. I'm trying to do better. I nodded, acknowledging both her effort and the difficulty of this conversation for someone as proud as Heather. I've noticed. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was recognition of the possibility of growth. For her, for me, for all of us. That evening, as I packed up to leave, I found a small gift bag on my desk. Inside was a beautiful ceramic mug with a note. For the woman who makes Stratus better every day. No more coffee duty, but you deserve the best cup for yourself, Michael. I smiled, running my finger over the delicate handle. It was a thoughtful gesture, one that acknowledged the past while looking toward a different future. As I drove home through the winter darkness, Chicago glittering around me, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with baked goods. The raw cake had been a catalyst, but the transformation that followed was about something much deeper. About standing up for my worth, about refusing to remain invisible, about finding my voice. My mother had been right all along. People might forget your name, but they never forget how you make them feel. I'd spent years making others feel valued while feeling worthless myself. Now I understood that true recognition begins with self-respect, with knowing your own value and refusing to accept less than you deserve. The next morning, I used my new mug for my coffee, carrying it proudly into the weekly leadership meeting. As we discussed quarterly projections and client acquisition strategies, I noticed something that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. People were looking to me for guidance, nodding at my suggestions, building on my ideas. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was essential, and I hadn't needed to bake a single thing to make it happen. 1 year after the unbaked cake incident, Stratus held its annual company gala at the Adler Planetarium. The Chicago skyline provided a spectacular backdrop as employees gathered in formal attire, champagne glasses glinting under soft lighting. I wore a midnight blue gown that I'd splurged on with part of my significantly improved salary, my hair swept up in an elegant updo. As I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations on my department's recent success with the healthcare initiative, I felt a quiet confidence that came not from external validation, but from within. Michael clinked his glass for attention, stepping onto the small stage at the front of the room. Welcome everyone to our annual celebration of another successful year at Stratus. Standard opening remarks followed. Financial highlights, client wins, industry recognition. Then his tone shifted. But numbers and awards only tell part of the story, he continued. The true measure of our success is how we grow, not just as a company, but as people. This past year taught us an important lesson about recognition, about seeing the value in every contribution, no matter who makes it. His eyes found me in the crowd. The story of what we now call the cake revolution. Chuckles rippled through the audience. When one of our most valuable team members finally showed us what we'd been missing by having the courage to do nothing at all. He raised his glass. To Melissa Carter, our strategic planning director, who taught us that sometimes the most powerful statement isn't what you serve, it's what you don't. Applause filled the room, accompanied by knowing smiles. The story had become something of a company legend, though few knew all the details. As the evening progressed, Sharon joined me by the windows overlooking the lake. Quite a year, she observed, clinking her glass against mine. Quite a transformation, I agreed. The Employee Contributions Review Committee has changed the culture. Around here, she said, people are more collaborative, more willing to share credit, and it all started with you. Not just me, I corrected her. It took everyone being willing to see the problem and address it. Even Heather. We both glanced across the room to where Heather stood chatting with some clients. Our relationship had evolved into something I wouldn't call friendship, but could definitely describe as mutual respect. She'd stopped taking credit for others' work and had even become an advocate for junior staff, ensuring their ideas were properly attributed. Speaking of changes, Sharon said, lowering her voice slightly, have you heard about the new policy? Which one? Starting next month, the company is hiring a professional catering service for all executive meetings. Her eyes twinkled. Apparently, someone convinced Michael that expecting employees to provide food service in addition to their actual jobs was problematic. I laughed, genuine and unrestrained. I can't imagine who would suggest such a thing. Later that evening, as the party wound down, I found myself alone on the terrace, gazing out at the city I loved. Chicago stretched before me, a tapestry of lights reflecting on the dark surface of Lake Michigan. The April air carried the promise of spring, of renewal. Penny, for your thoughts, came a voice behind me. I turned to find Raj, our IT director, holding 2 cups of coffee. He offered one to me with a smile. I figured after all that champagne, this might be welcome, he said. Perfect timing, I replied, accepting the cup, gratefully. Thank you. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping our coffee. Raj had become a valued colleague over the past year, his technical expertise proving invaluable to several of my strategic initiatives. Unlike many at Stratus Edge, he'd always seen me, had always made a point to acknowledge my contributions, even before the cake incident. I was just thinking about how much has changed, I told him. Not just professionally, but personally. I don't think I realized how much of myself I'd lost until I started finding it again. He nodded thoughtfully. It takes courage to make yourself visible, especially when everyone's comfortable with you being invisible. It wasn't just courage, I admitted. It was desperation. I couldn't keep going the way things were. Sometimes that's what it takes, Raj said. Rock bottom becomes the solid foundation on which you rebuild. The poetry of his words struck me. That should be on a coffee mug. We both laughed, the sound carrying out over the water. So what's next for Melissa Carter? He asked. Now that you've revolutionized Stratus Edge and become a legend in the process? I considered the question seriously. I want to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. Not just here, but anywhere. The committee is a start, but there's more to do. Like what? I'm working with HR to develop mentorship programs for junior staff, I explained, teaching them how to advocate for themselves, how to ensure their contributions are recognized, how to avoid the trap I fell into. Raj nodded, approvingly. That's important work. And I'm baking again, I added with a smile. Not for meetings or because I have to, but because I love it. I'm teaching a weekend class at the community center where my mom used to volunteer. Full circle, he observed, in the best way. As we turned to head back inside, Raj hesitated. You know, there's a new fusion restaurant that opened in Wicker Park. Would you like to check it out sometime? Maybe Friday? The invitation hung in the air between us, unexpected, but not unwelcome. I studied his face, the kind eyes, the genuine smile, and felt a flutter of possibility. I'd like that, I said simply. Walking back through the gala, I caught my reflection in one of the planetarium's glass walls, elegant in my blue dress, standing tall, eyes bright with purpose and contentment. The woman looking back at me wasn't the invisible coffee lady or even just the strategic planning director. She was Melissa Carter, whole and seen and valued. The next morning, I woke early, the habit of years still ingrained despite no longer being necessary. But instead of rushing to beat traffic, I took my time. I brewed coffee in my special mug, opened the windows to let in the spring breeze, and began mixing ingredients for my mother's cinnamon rolls. As the sweet, spicy scent filled my apartment, I thought about the lessons of the past year, about visibility and value, about the difference between serving and surrendering, about how sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop doing what's expected. The rolls were perfect, golden brown, glistening with icing. I arranged a few on a plate for myself and packed the rest in a container. Not for the office, not for approval, but for my neighbors. A gift freely given, with no expectation of return. Because that's the thing about baking, about giving, about being seen. When it comes from choice rather than obligation, it transforms from burden to joy. If you're always the one filling cups, people forget you're thirsty too. But when you finally pour yourself a drink, you realize how sweet it tastes, especially when you're the one who decided what goes in the cup. Sometimes the most powerful statement isn't what you serve, it's what you don't. And sometimes, the sweetest victory isn't in being recognized by others, but in finally, truly recognizing yourself.